I would like to ask Ramez Naam to join me on the stage, because he will be followed by people who will join us in the second panel discussion of Singularity University Czech Summit 2018. Ramez, welcome once again.
Danielle, good to be here.
How are you doing? Everything good?
Wonderful.
We heard some big questions.
Yes.
We are talking about big topics. What will you concentrate in this panel discussion on?
We're going to talk about how big companies can interface with little companies and how that changes the nature of work.
Who are the panelists? Could you introduce us, please?
Yes, we have two friends from Poland here. We have Dariusz, who works at Business Link, which is an incubator. Dariusz, you want to come on up here? We're getting the chairs up. Well, along with Dariusz, we have, thank you.
Welcome.
Jarosław from Skanska, who's working with Business Link also. Filip, who helps big companies engage with digital. And welcome back, John.
Big task, big questions, big topics. It's all on to you.
Thanks. John, I want to start with you, actually. I was going to start with our friends from Poland, but you said some things that are so provocative. I just want to ask you an even more provocative question. If the future, I'm going to scoot out here so people can see us better on this side. If the future of work requires more feminine archetypes, does that mean we need more women in leadership positions in work?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that that's a whole other discussion, but certainly I believe, again, many people argue we need the women represented because it's socially right, it's socially just. I believe it's an imperative. I don't think it's just, it is socially just, but without that feminine archetype, without that representation in our leadership, we're going to be in trouble.
Okay, thank you very much. Now let's take it to our friends who are here from Poland. So Dariusz, you founded Business Link. What is Business Link?
Yeah. Hello, thank you. That's the quite easy question. Thank you for that. I started with my friend and startups in Poland ecosystem. This is the biggest ecosystem in Central and Eastern Europe. Consists of 3 parts. First of all, we have incubators, 56 incubators across country, where we have 2,200 startups, small projects there. Secondly, we have seed capital fund, where we invest in more than 100 companies till now, where we did, for example, the biggest return, 40 times from one startup. And we have also venture capital fund called B-Value, where 5 of the most probably quite known Polish investors came to us, and we established that B-Value fund. And third part is called Business Link. And Business Link are 14 co-working spaces across country, but co-working spaces with acceleration processes. And I think it's growing quite fast. We have 540 companies now.
Right, so your companies that are in your space are mostly startups themselves?
Yeah, mostly startups, but also changing corporations. Yeah, we would like to convince corporations to change, because otherwise they will collapse in a few years.
So Jarosław, you're from Skanska, a very large Polish construction and real estate company, and you have made an investment in Business Link.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Actually, it's, as most of you know, a very large Swedish company. And it's 130 years old. And I must say that corporations are non-monochromatic, I would say. They are very different inside. I will give you an example, because that's why we succeeded with the joint venture of Business Link. When I joined Skanska in my early days, I learned 2 things. First thing was that the average working time of the employee of Skanska, how long he is in the company, is 15 years, so very long for me. in Sweden. And the second thing I learned is that in commercial development Europe, which is the part of Skanska I'm working for, nobody has his own desk in the office. So coming from the organization when I had my own room and going to the organization when I don't have my own desk place, I just need to pick my desk every day or pick the place I want to work. I was very disrupted. and that was, and of course I had my angry time, and then I have my reflection time. At the end, it works very well, and that's why I think we could do the things we did later.
So why did you and Skanska decide to invest in BusinessLink?
Because actually there are two things which were, because the first easy answer is actually already explained by you, because of disruption, because we felt as Skanska that developing the office buildings with the tenants who has 5 to 10 years lease agreement is going to end soon. Actually, everybody needs, our tenants needs more and more flexibility, so because of the changing world, because of this disruption, they cannot predict how much space they will need in 2, 3, 4 years. And it will be, as you say, more rapid, more violent in the future. So for us, it's obvious we need to go into flexibility. So that's what. But why corporation could embed something which is disruptive for itself? There were two reasons. First reason, I think you just discussed. My boss is a woman. And the second reason is that the unit in the Skanska I work for is the average age is 35 years, I think. And then average for Skanska is something like 50 probably. So we could do it because this is the environment which is easier to adopt.
So your boss had more willingness to try to disrupt her own business than most bosses.
And convince her bosses to do so.
Right. And were there any worries you had in BusinessLink of taking investment from a large corporation that was also sort of a competitor?
Could you repeat?
Were there any concerns you had about taking investment from a large corporation that worked in a very different way?
Yeah, this is always the issue, how to cooperate with corporations. And in my opinion, we are going to the world where startups are emerging more fast, and everyone could start home company. As John said, I trust in people, in dreams, in passion. I think that starting home company is a better way to go to the corporation. And corporations should be more lean, like a competence hub in the future, in my opinion. They should outsource more to startups on the market. And it is why we created that kind of platform to bring startups and corporations together. And I think, in my opinion, the Skanska understand that way of thinking and that way of doing. It is why they made quite big investment, one of the biggest in our country.
Were there pitfalls you found in trying to work together once the investment was made?
The pitfalls, I can say about pitfalls because I'm a middleman between the corporation and the startup, and the cultural clash is on me, I would say. The problem is that in corporation everything needs to be standardized and everything needs to be predicted, forecasted, and in startup everything changes every week, so the heartbeat of our decision makers in Sweden sometimes are very high because they see, yeah, they hear about things they haven't heard 2 weeks before, and that's disruptive for them. But I hope that it will change the corporation for better. But what we want to do, and what we want to do together, is to create the platform to actually join the startups and corporations in the whole CE region. Our main goal is to create a network, again, a network of co-working spaces, which are not small co-working spaces, they are quite big, they are 4,000 or 5,000 square meters, and you can have a co-work there, you can have a dedicated desk, you can have private office, whatever you want, but we want to make it cross-country CEE hub.
And create that hub because we trust that we can be visible in the global area and compete with such countries like Israel, Korea, and so on, only in the hub. Not like Czech, like Poland countries alone, but in the hub, I think we can do much more. We are people, especially young people, not maybe great tellers, but great doers, and I think this is our advantage on the global scale.
Okay, and you guys have an announcement you want to make?
Yeah, that of course one of the main places we wanted to be from the beginning, and we want us also as Skanska, as Business Link to develop is Prague. So we are opening our first location in Prague very soon, in probably 3 months.
In July, 1st July.
Oh, firm date, excellent. Filip, you help big corporations transform digitally. What does that mean?
That means that we try to increase their readiness for digital transformation, because I'll be a devil's advocate here. I hear amazing things, but the data shows basically that what we experience now is the lowest growth of productivity of last 150 years. So the whole exponential thing is amazing, but we are pretty slow now. So what we do is we try to speed things up, and we try to, we call it that we try to make organizations hot. That means to increase their human organization and technology readiness for digitalization.
And what are the barriers that you find?
So one of the things, of course, is management. Maybe some of you even. Management teams are not leading by example, so they promote digitalization, but they are still not using paperless office. They are living in the old world, so the leadership, of course. Then it's the failure, the fear of failure, because everything needs to fit and everything. The presentation that are in the corporations, everything is successful. Everything is successful all the time. And we all know how Excel works. And then it's, of course, it's IT readiness, because IT is a huge blocker of innovations recently, because you need to have these old systems that run the business. Then you need the second speed, that is customer-facing applications, and then you even need the third speed. This is how to improve our day-to-day operations and our own work. And then maybe the biggest barrier of all is the success, because our economy is growing, our KPIs, everybody is successful. So basically the motivation for the change is sometimes at the level of zero. Why to change? It's more work, it's more risk. So the managers doesn't want to change at all.
John, do you see that when you talk to companies that they feel that they're doing well, their revenue is going up, so they don't feel any risk from disruption?
Well, again, I'll be a bit of a contrarian in that in my experience, every company I talk to today has a digital transformation program. There is not an exception. Everyone has a digital transformation program. And yet when I probe in to understand what that digital transformation is, it's basically taking digital technology to do what we've always done faster and cheaper. Scalable efficiency. In my mind, that is not transformation. That's just taking scalable efficiency to the next level. To me, the key question I ask for digital transformation is, have you stepped back and asked, what business should I really be in? And until you have asked and answered that question, I don't believe you've had digital transformation. So.
To add something to what you just said is that actually every company also thinks about innovations, and I observe how it's being done. You just pick the startup which improves your product a bit, and then, of course, you implement it or buy it or cooperate with it, but you are not changing the business itself. Actually, I mean the real estate business, this is one of the most, I think, innovation-resistant business you can imagine. Of course, there is a prop tech, and I'm glad that it's something like this, but still we are in the early stages. So if anyone wants to improve real estate, we are open to do so.
I definitely agree, but the problem is that sometimes the management and the board of directors is not ready, and they don't have, they lack of knowledge. So basically, we experienced last week, we had a meeting with a big investment firm, and they say, but we don't need any digital education because we have, really big competitors in China, and Alipay will be our biggest competitor in the next 5 years. So what we do is we try to change the mindset, because not only the Alipay will be the biggest competitor, no, it will be their biggest distribution channels, and these need to change. And what we experience is really that the managers, sometimes they lack this creativity thinking, and they all the time they think that the digitalization makes them improve the services. But basically, you will not invent the light bulb by improving the candle. So sometimes really you need the change of the thinking itself.
Yeah. So where does that, answering that question of what business should you be in, does that have to come from the CEO and the board? Does that ever come from middle management or lower management?
It can come from anywhere. I would say that ultimately to drive transformation, you have to have at least one person at the most senior level, ideally the CEO, but if not, somebody who reports to the CEO, who has both the conviction and courage that there is a fundamentally different business that needs to be built, and will help protect the initiatives to create that very different business from the immune system and the antibodies that are guaranteed to try to crush it. And so I think it's, in my experience, it's a mistake to try to get the entire senior leadership team aligned around that we need a fundamentally different business. I have much more modest objectives, one or two very senior people.
And then let them go off autonomously, or how does that?
Well, then it's the notion of scaling an edge. Find an edge to the existing business that has the potential to become that new core business, and focus on scaling that edge rather than trying to convince everybody in the existing business that they need to be a very different business.
Mm-hmm. Dariusz, you incubate startups, you invest in startups, you house them in your co-working space. You must see them work with big businesses, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. What leads to success when a startup is trying to integrate with a big business?
Yeah, first of all, we have to change mentality in startups and also and mainly in corporations, as we said before. That needs to change the core idea in corporations. For example, in Poland we have few companies, governmental companies, which have more employees than Apple. We have, for example, corporations like even Skańska, who has more than 100,000 people inside. It's very, very hard to make innovation in that kind of corporations and organizations. This is first of all. And we are talking about today is about mainly how world is going, and that is going fast. In my opinion, I agree with Filip, it's not going fast. We are still going slow. Why? In many areas like transport, like buildings, we are still in the same stage like we were 5-10 years ago. For example, planes, there are duopoly of two corporations, and when we compare mobile to, for example, airplanes, we should fly from London to New York in 1 hour and a half, and we are not doing that. Why? Because corporations block startups, block innovation in main points. In my opinion, this is.
Is there a way to push through that?
Sorry?
Is there a way to push through that? What would you change?
The way is change mentality on both sides. First of all, in corporations, that it should be lean, small, and outsource outside many processes to startups. And for startups, idea is to be closer to corporations, because only working on B2C market, they don't have so much fuel to grow.
I think that the most important thing in this is communication, because corporations are pretty closed organizations for others, for competitions, for competition for others. And so what we are doing, we are actually in the co-working business. We are creating places where this corporation can meet startups. And actually look how this grows over years. In 2007, we had globally 14 co-working spaces. In 2017, we have 14,000 co-working spaces. And this is more
say
than
those
Agora.
numbers again. Say those numbers again, please.
Excuse me?
Say those numbers again, please.
14,000.
1,000x growth in 10 years.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
So we think this is the way we will work in the future, because this is creative environment. You meet other people also physically, which is, I think, important, and talk to them and work with them or next to them, and this is and you do different things. You are not again doing the same thing as in corporations. When you have a finance department, everybody are doing the same. It's not like this in our spaces, and that's the clue. This is how we communicate.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I strongly believe that there is a power in hanging out with innovators, because eventually you'll become one. Because if you see how things are done in startups and technology companies, then you come back and you are pissed, because I want to do it that way. I don't want to wait 3 months for something. So basically, this kind of know-how exchange works. And I'm sorry if they are my friends from IBM, but there is a famous quote from 70s, I think. Nobody was fired by buying IBM computer. And I think this needs to change as well, because by buying services from startups, organizations learn how to work differently. So I think this works as well.
So how do you, that's about risk aversion, right? So how do you get a big company to be confident enough in a startup that they can buy from them?
So you need a permission from the top management that need to support these activities. And there are several things. You can do startup days, you can do initiatives like More Than Zero, that you will spend more than €0 for startups. And basically you just invite them, you just open your arms, because sometimes startups, they have great technology, but they don't know how to sell. So sometimes the corporations need to act proactively and need to open their arms and says, okay, so come on and show us what you can do with us.
John, you've been waiting.
I was just going to say that in the context I emphasize scalable learning. Often I'm interpreted as saying, well, just focus on helping your employees to learn faster. I use the quote from Bill Joy, who said, just remember one thing, no matter how many smart people you have within your organization, there are a lot more smart people outside your organization. And so if you're not very aggressive in creating ecosystems and environments where people can interact, smart people can interact across companies, you're not going to scale learning to the extent you need to in this kind of world.
So practically speaking, what does that look like? Do you, as a big corporation, do you invite startups to come into your space? How do you cause that cross-pollination to happen?
You know, in my experience, the most effective way is to find a performance issue or challenge that you are facing as a large company and identify a set of participants who are also facing that performance challenge. So together, coming together, you can address this and come up with a much more creative answer. It builds credibility both for the large company and the small companies that there's a mutual benefit here. It's not just us versus them, or one side benefits, the other side doesn't. It's being very explicit up front. What's the metric that we would look to determine whether we achieved a higher level of performance, and measure your progress based on that.
Let me get more provocative. So you talked about this future of work and changing the model, and we've got a startup landscape here. In the future, do large corporations even exist, or is it all a network of startups working together?
Oh boy, we did a whole research project on that one too. Our answer is it's both. That again, in the product and service portion of the economy, coming up with creative products and services, we're going to see more and more fragmentation, small companies that prevail. It's going to be harder and harder for large companies to hold on to positions there. On the other side, there's a whole set of businesses that we call infrastructure management businesses, high volume, routine processing kind of activity, running a data center, running a logistics network. Those are running a platform. Those are very scale intensive and will concentrate and consolidate. There's another business which is more speculative, but we think has huge potential for concentration, is what we call the trusted advisor business, where you get to know individuals more and more deeply and become more and more helpful to them. Those businesses, we believe, have economies of scope. The more I know about you as an individual, the more helpful I can be to you. So there's value to scope. It's harder for a new entrant who just sees a small part of who you are to be helpful. And the more other people I see and am working with, the more helpful I can be to each individual, because I can look for patterns and say, you know, you haven't asked for this, but by the way, other people in similar situations have gotten huge value from this activity. And so, again, trusted advisor, we believe over time will become a very, very concentrated, consolidated global business.
Dariusz, you want to talk? And we're about at the end. So we're going to give you the last word on the panel here.
Okay, because we are a little bit maybe pessimistic, but at the end I would like to say that the change is coming, and I think that like Skanska, we are working with Audi, with Citibank, the corporations are changing, and I think there is no better time to set up own company, to start own startup than now, and than in Central and Eastern Europe, I think, and please do that.
No better time to start a startup than now. All right, thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our panelists. And now I think Daniel will come back on stage. Thank you.